completely machinima. And now for something completely machinima. And now for something completely machinima.
Hello
ahead,
and
Phil.
welcome to And Now for Something Completely Machinima. We're keeping it. We're doing it live. Welcome to And Now for Something Completely Machinima, the podcast about machinima, virtual production, real-time animation, and as they might be giants would say, a bunch of other stuff. I'm your host, Phil Rice, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Ricky Grove, Tracy Harwood,
Hello.
and Damien Valentine.
Hello.
So this week we are covering a rather unique pick in the course of our productions. We've only had one other pick in the history of the whole show that is from, at least inspired by this era or this type of machinima. And Ricky has found a real gem here. So Ricky, why don't you tell us about it?
Sure thing. I enjoy very much browsing through archive.org. It is an extraordinary site. And I'm always impressed with their willingness to push their stated goal of being an online library. I know they've had some legal issues in the last couple of years, mostly from publishers, but they have some extraordinary things in there. You could do a deep dive for hours in it. And the Machinima collection is no exception. There's stuff from all over the world there. And they include something that is very unique. It's called the demo. And the demo is kind of it's part of a collection of people who get together using demos called the Demoscene. And they're sort of cousins of machinima filmmakers. It's real time, but it's done differently in that the people who make them are more coders, although they gather into groups in which they usually have a musician, they have an artist, a graphics person, and then they have the coders. And they create a very interesting presentation. Primarily, they've been music videos, but there have been all sorts of unusual presentations. And they release them as a demo, which is an EXE self-containing executable. And they challenge each other by restricting the size of the demo or making it on old hardware like a Amiga computer or something like that. And they want to create clever visuals and unusual images. I find them far less responding to popular culture than machinima. Machinima often will take they'll use the game story to tell something, but machinima filmmakers will often respond to popular films, popular videos that are out, that kind of thing. The demo scene is really self-contained. And one of the best things that they've done is that movement has stayed together. Even today, you can go to the SIGGRAPH, which is the big computer conference and entertainment conference around the world, and they always have Demoscene presentations, and they have groups that meet together. You compare that to the history of machinima, which is fractured, and I'm not even sure you could say there is a machinima community. There certainly isn't one large one. They're all little fragmented pieces, but the Demoscene still exists, and they continue to make interesting stuff. They create tools for demo filmmakers. But that's to say that as I was browsing, I came across an extraordinary film called Nine, using the Roman numerals 1 and X, by Moppi Productions. A lot of the demo scene started in Europe and in Finland and other places, and then migrated over to America, and then it became a world group. Moppi Productions was a Finnish group, and they had a lot of fun. They were founded in 1997. And they were part of a sort of new movement in the demo scene, which prioritized design and synchronization of media with music over the old school coding sort of tricks. And when I watched it, I was just stunned by it, because it's a fascinating combination of abstract visuals combined with a kind of somewhat sentimental story. And you don't usually see that combination happen. It's basically people waiting for a tram, and one guy turns to an older fellow smoking a pipe, and he says, "I don't think the tram's going to show up." And the old guy has this little moment where he fantasizes himself as the tram conductor, going along and people getting on and off and everything, until finally the controls get kind of wanky, and it's almost like he's going to have a crash. And then he wakes up and they're back, and then the tram shows up and they get on, and that's it. So it's a kind of sentimental, simple story structure, but the result, the way they've depicted this story, is so intriguing. It's so filled with a sense of fun, which I think almost all abstract films can benefit from. Brevity. It's a brief, it's like 3 minutes. Brevity and a sense of humor or fun, because it leavens that abstractness. Because a lot of times viewers will be confused because we tend to raise realism much higher than any sort of abstract presentation. So that leavens that alienation from abstraction. And it's really quite beautiful. And the music is really sort of, it's not quite electronica, but it's in that direction. I found it absolutely irresistible. And I really was excited about bringing the film to you guys to see what you thought of it. So over to you guys.
Well, mesmerizing, absolutely mesmerizing. I was really intrigued by this. And the more I started looking into it, the more intrigued I was by both by the film, but also its significance, which I hadn't really factored into anything that I've looked at previously. So, it got me diving into a little bit of the demo scene and having a look at what was going on in the demo scene at that kind of period of time, and what was going on with this particular film. I'll go through my notes, and then you guys riff off them when you can. So it turns out this is actually, I suppose, probably a perfect example of what happens when a demo, as Ricky describes them, stops trying to impress you technically, and instead tries to feel like an actual film. And in the year that this was released, or made and performed, which was 2003, this was one of those kind of demos that really challenged the expectations of what the demo scene was all about. Some at the time called it really visionary, and others said it wasn't really a demo at all, but a strange kind of minimalist production, which ultimately became, I think, at the time, one of the most talked about demos of its era. And for those that are a little bit more unfamiliar, if you're following us on this channel, we talk mainly about machinima. So if you're a little bit unfamiliar with the demo scene, it's got the machinima community has got roots in the demo scene, but it was a digital art community where, as Ricky said, programmers, musicians, visual artists kind of collaborated to create fundamentally real-time audio-visual programs called these demos. And instead of playing them as pre-rendered videos, the demos themselves were they often used they often generated visuals and live music through the code whilst the program was being run. And so that's why you downloaded them as executable files if you were going to do it remotely. But the scene actually began in the 1980s among computer hobbyists primarily, as I understand it, who created kind of effectively what were described as small animated introductions for cracked games. And over time, those kind of introductions evolved into standalone works. And by the sort of 1990s, the demo scene had become its kind of own international subculture. And creators organized themselves into these teams. They were called demo groups, as Ricky said. And these productions were then presented at demo parties, such as the one that this was presented at, Assembly. And of course, as I said, it's the spiritual origins of the machinima community too, because, cracked games were kind of where some of the early machinima films came from, the Quake movies and whatnot. It's interesting though, because the demo scene still exists today, but its focus has really rather broadened. Modern demos still celebrate technical skill, but they also emphasize much more the artistic direction and design and audiovisual storytelling. And in fact, the demo scene has now been recognized in several European countries as part of UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage, unlike machinima, which has never been recognized in that way, which fundamentally highlights its importance as a unique kind of form of digital art. Now, this particular film, I think, sits at the transition between these two eras. It's 2003, but it sits very much between the kind of coding introduction and the sort of more filmic storytelling, narrative-based type of demo. And I think why it's particularly important is because it shows just how real-time graphics could move beyond technical spectacle and start to resemble more of this sort of digital filmmaking. Before I want to talk about the film, though, I think it's worth just, as you say, mentioning a little bit more about the group behind it. Moppi, as you said, was a kind of small Finnish demo scene group that began releasing these productions in the late 90s. But like many of the groups, it was made up of programmers, artists, and musicians who primarily created demos purely for demo party competitions. And that's what it became known for doing. Some of the key contributors were programmers called CSUM and G-Step and Ossie. Graphics artists were Memon and Rika. And the musician, who still is on the go, still offering his skills, as far as I can tell, is Sumo Lounge. And the group gained much wider recognition in the early 2000s, with particularly a demo that it released in 2002 called Halla, which then was nominated for the Scene, it's very tempting, Scene Awards. But their most famous production is actually this one, Nine, which was released at Assembly in 2003. And it went on to win several Scene Awards, including Best Demo, Best Direction, and became one of the most discussed demos of its time because of this distinctive cinematic style that you can see in it. It was coded for a PC demo using OpenGL for rendering. But what I think makes it particularly interesting is it's not just its reception, which I think is unique among demos at the time, but it's the way that it challenged what demos were expected to be at that time. So in the early 2000s, most PC demos followed this kind of fairly recognizable structure. They were often built as sequences of technical showcases, things like particle systems, these kind of procedural landscapes, tunnels, metaballs, and other kind of graphics techniques is kind of what you tended to see with them. Each of them kind of presented a bit of that before kind of transitioning to the the next sort of effect. And the pacing of it was usually quite fast. It was usually very associated with electronica style music, and it was fundamentally designed to impress the audiences watching live at a demo party. It was never really intended to be viewed as a video such as we're viewing this one now. There's a really classic example of the style that was around at that kind of time. It was called the popular demo by a group called Farbrausch. That was released in the same year, and I'll share a link to that so that you can kind of see just how typical those kinds of things were with these sort of energetic, kind of colourful visual effects that they tended to use. The scenes just sort of bam, 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 follow each other really rapidly, and what they're trying to do is demonstrate the different graphical techniques. So when you compare that kind of typical stuff that was around at that time, this is most definitely unique in its era, really. With what it's trying to convey in these technical effects, not so much as technical effects, but more as an experimental film. And as you said, Ricky, it's a sort of a series of stylized environments populated with these kind of simplified humanoid characters, and the characters interact with whatever these abstract objects and structures are. But I think their actions, I think, as you look at them, they kind of remain a little bit ambiguous. And I do think there's a bit of a story which I got the sense of too, but it's quite fragmented in some regards, I think. And I think fundamentally it's not so much about the narrative as it is about the visual staging of what you're seeing. So, for example, the opening moments kind of really, I think, set the tone quite different to what you see in the bulk of the film. It kind of begins with this sort of really dark, minimal, gradually revealing sort of sparse digital landscape, and these kind of tiny humanoid figures that appear in the space. And then what you've got is the camera moving kind of slowly, almost like a cinematic tracking shot, guiding you through the environment rather than sort of jumping rapidly between the scenes. And it's a bit like, just reminded me a little bit like a sort of a 2D painting, almost Liechtensteinish in its kind of cartoon comic-like presentation. And it's that slow pacing, though, that continues throughout the demo, which is kind of interesting. The scenes are kind of arranged almost like theatrical stages or kind of sculptural installations, and these characters gather around these objects and move kind of across these open spaces, or just simply stand observing something off the screen, and you become a distant observer of these scenes. You're not really looking at it as a demo in the traditional way at all. And then by the middle of the demo, what you've got is these environments beginning to expand a little, and you see this kind of more abstract environmental architectural forms, and these sort of symbolic objects emerging where the characters are going for a ride on the tram. And the camera itself is circling around these scenes really slowly, encouraging you to kind of look at what the composition is and the spatial arrangement, rather than sort of focusing on the specific effects. Really cleverly done, I think. It really highlights, I think, one of the defining characteristics of this particular film, which is its minimalist visual design. And instead of these kind of dense textures and complex geometry that was typical of the time, these environments are made simply from shapes and kind of flat shading, and the characters themselves are really, they're just more figurines or toys or puppets even, which in effect kind of nicely shift you away from the technical realism and more towards the sort of visual composition and the lighting and the atmosphere.
It's almost like stop motion
Almost,
using
yeah.
using a combination of photographs and images from magazines, like collage kind of
Very
thing.
much collage, yeah, absolutely. It's really very unusual. I mean, what's the M. Dot Strange game that you introduced us to a while ago?
Oh, don't. Why do you
Nightmare
ask me to?
Puppeteer.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, it's a little bit like that in some regards, isn't it?
Yeah,
In kind of strangeness of it. But I think what's interesting is what the way the music supports it as well. It's slower than you would expect demo music to be. It's more sort of contemplative and rhythmic
yeah.
than what you would have seen with other demo stuff. Yeah, it's really kind of fascinating in that regard. I think by the later part of it, it returns to more denser, more kind of visual elements. To try and sort of bring it back to almost where it started, really. I think the overall style remains generally consistent. There's kind of this sort of minimal geometry thing going on. There's this deliberate camera movement, which I think is fascinating, and these sort of stage compositions, which I think are also really
Yeah,
brilliantly
yeah.
well done for the time of it. And it's the slow pace of it that's kind of fascinating, and it sort of fades out rather interestingly without ever really, it doesn't give you a conclusion. It just leaves you with an impression.
I don't think so because I got more of a storyline in it.
You did,
And what
yeah.
happens is the real pram shows up and they get on the pram and that's it. That's the end of it. So I think
Right.
it was a much clearer. You're describing it, it's all accurate, but the your choice of words make it seem a little more abstract than it actually is, I think.
No,
That's just my opinion.
well, I did find it really quite abstract when I was, like I said, highly experimental, I think.
Yeah,
Um, but the other thing I think is worth mentioning is the conversation that it sparked within the demo scene community, because it was a bit of a marker in the sand in many ways. Sites like we'll put a link to which you shared with us, Ricky, the pue.net. I mean, some of the folks that saw this at the time, they obviously enjoyed the direction this was going in, the unique visual identity of it and all the rest of it. They argued that it was through something like this, it was clearly possible to do things that were beyond technical demonstrations towards things that could become a form of digital art. And they were quite happy to see that. But there were a lot that were very much more critical. And I do mean a lot. I think one of the biggest complaints I saw of it was to do with its performance. There were a lot of people reporting that the demo ran really slowly or failed to run at all on their hardware. And a lot of critics argued that the demos should be optimized to run smoothly on typical machines, and that relying on these kind of high-end hardware machines undermined the tradition of the technical efficiency in the demo scene. So they argued for and against it, really, but there was a lot that just didn't like what it began to stand for, really. And that ultimately, I think, touched on a much deeper question, which sort of emerged as, well, what exactly should a demo be? And from there, what you got then was folks arguing, well, demos are fundamentally about technical mastery and pushing the hardware to its limits, where you're sort of maintaining efficiency and real-time performance. And, I guess from this perspective, I guess the primary goal then was to demonstrate new techniques. But others were also then saying that no, actually, demos are a creative medium where this, code can become a tool for artistic
right,
expression. And
right.
in that view, you've got more folks talking about visual design and atmosphere and conceptual ideas as being just as important as technical innovation. And it's this film that sat right at the center of the
Yeah.
tension in that kind of debate. So
Well,
it's
I think that happens often with a really impactful work of art.
absolutely.
I remember reading a lot in the 30s of artists who went to see a very famous show in which Picasso's Guernica was shown. And people don't realize Guernica, which is about the Spanish Civil War, was huge. It was like 18 feet across, 8 feet high. And artists just came away stunned from that. And that brings up a dialogue of, well, what are we doing as artists? How are we? And it redefined the artists redefine what it is they want to achieve. And I think this film did that.
Yeah. Well, I just got one more thing I want to just sort of reflect on, really, because, looking back at this and looking at it, you kind of think, well, why is it not machinima? Why is it demo? Why is it not machinima? And I think this is an example of something that really is moving much closer to digital filmmaking and a type of real-time performative machinima in general. I think the pacing, the staged scenes, the narrative imagery all suggest really that real-time graphics could be used to create, audio visual experiences really. But on the other hand, really, when you sort of when you think about it, the intersection between code and cinema and digital art was exactly where machinima sat as well. So it's these you've got these two kind of things crossing, I think, at this point in time, and I think that makes this one a really fascinating milestone in what really became the evolving relationship between the demo scene and digital animation. But whereas machinima, I think machinima began to evolve in an entirely different way, really. It became much more about storytelling aspects, whereas the demo scene, I think, became much more focused on real-time performance.
Yeah.
And that's lost when you show this as a video and not run it as an executable file. And of course, you can find this online as a video. We've just, we can just watch this now, even on the archive. It's there as a video file. I mean, the minute it got recorded into DivX format or MP format, it's no different than to Machinima. But it's worth remembering that it's not how it was intended to be seen, whereas a lot of Machinima was intended to be seen, or is more and more intended to be seen as not, well, I mean, it's made in as a real-time piece, but it's made to be viewed through the medium of video.
Yeah. Good
So
point.
I think that's an interesting distinction, which kind of is lost in the way that we're looking at it. But great choice. Really interesting to have a look at it. Really important film in the history of what we talk about on this show generally, I think. So yeah,
Thanks, Tracy.
I am not surprised that some people had issues running this smoothly at the time. Because when you watch it, it's still pretty visually impressive, even by today's standards. When you think back to the video games that are being released at that time, this stands out way above that. So, of course, it's not going to be optimized for a lot of computers because what's one thing, they didn't really have to worry about that. But also, it must have been a very demanding thing to just to run. And the upside of that is, and obviously it's got this kind of stylized look to it, but it still looks really good. More than 20 years later. So yeah, I'm not surprised that people struggled with it. I did try see if I could download, because in our show notes we've put together, there is a link to download it, but I couldn't get the actual link to work, so I don't know how it would run on a modern computer.
You'd need an emulator
Okay.
of some
No,
sort.
you don't. No, you don't.
No?
No.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
I'll get you guys a working link to the file if you want, because the mirrors, a lot of them were broken, but I can
Ah,
put it on Dropbox and maybe we can make it available to the audience as well.
oh,
Okay.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Um, yeah, so yeah, I'd like to see that just to see it in the original, the way it's originally intended. A couple of things that came to mind when I watched Skip. See, I've been involved with buses and public transport for a while, and that opening scene where he's saying he doesn't think it's going to turn up, and I thought that sounds very familiar. And then his fantasy of getting on the tram and driving it himself. I've thought about that, and I'm fairly certain some of the other conversations I've had other passengers waiting, they've had similar ideas as well. Or when you're at the bus station and you can see your bus parked over there, it's got the number on it, and there's no driver, so it's just sat there, and you're thinking, if I went over there now, what would it be like to drive that home? So obviously, decades have passed since this was released, but that's still a very familiar thing that I could relate to.
Uh-huh.
So I enjoyed it for that perspective. I enjoyed the creativity behind it. I like the style and all that, and the passengers. I even noticed that one of the passengers was Mr. Spock.
Yes.
Ah,
You can see very unusual faces, if
Yeah.
you go back and rewind it. There's odd sort of political figures, and I think there was a basketball player at one point in there, and a famous hockey player with his two teeth removed, front
Yeah.
teeth gone. Yeah.
It's one of those films you have to watch it several times because there are things you're going to miss. Like even the title Nine, I was thinking, what's this got to do with nine? But there's a shot where when he starts the fantasy and he turns up with the tram, the doors open, and you kind of got the camera is as if you're the passenger getting onto it. There's a timetable, and it's a number nine tram.
Ah,
uh,
So little details like that, which you kind of don't notice the first time around. So when you watch it more than once, because I'd highly recommend it just
nice,
for that.
nice catch.
yeah.
Yeah. And because I was thinking, why is it called nine in the Roman numerals, not nine or something else?
X.
Because
Yeah.
it just looks cool.
That too. So yeah, this is a great film. I really enjoyed it, and I like the artistic side to it, and all the different passengers, and even the non-human passengers that get on, which
The
you'll see when you
chickens?
watch. Yeah, and the giraffe.
Love the chickens.
The
chickens
giraffe
are
was
great.
my favorite, yeah.
Yeah, the giraffe that's so tall that has to open the roof to look out.
It's
It's
crazy,
got
isn't it?
almost it has almost a Dr. Seuss feel to the
Yeah.
Hmm.
to the piece,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I haven't really followed the demo scene that closely, but this is a great film. So I really enjoyed it. So Ricky, thank you for choosing it and sharing it with us.
Sure thing.
Yeah, it is funny how the same people who would say that the essence of the demo scene is pushing hardware to its limits. Among them are the same people who say it won't run on my machine.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point, right? In 2003, that's
Yeah.
kind of the
Very
point.
good,
is to
very
push it to
good.
its limit. So this film does still run as an executable. I ran it. I've got kind of the lowest end of the high end NVIDIA RTX cards, and it runs no problem. And you actually, when you launch it, it brings up a little dialog where you can choose the resolution you want to run it at.
Oh, okay.
When I try to run it at max resolution, it ends up kind of letterboxing in a weird way, but it's still most of the screen. And it is a rich render. Like that is really a great way to experience this, and the audio quality is phenomenal as well. So we are going to include a link to that in the show notes. I've already put it up on Google Drive while we were talking.
Brilliant.
And
Thank you.
Tracy, I've put that on the board so we can put that in the links. It's a public link. Anyone can download it. With our disclaimers, of course. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but it is an executable. I downloaded it secondarily to be able to view it that way, but mainly I just wanted to open up the hood and see what is going on with this
Right,
thing.
right.
And and you can do that. You can browse through and see all the files that comprise this. It's kind of fascinating. So this film was in that assembly competition of 2003. It actually was the second place film.
Ah.
I have not seen the first place film. Nobody's talking about the first place film. So, and of course, there's people in the very long comments thread on this where the executable is published, and there's some comments to that effect, and conspiracies and political. Somebody had friends with somebody. Who knows? Who really knows?
Who
But
cares?
this is a superb film. It's as we're talking about some of the criticism that was levied at this from within the Demoscene community about, is this really a demo anymore? It's funny how that conversation gives a real deja vu when you look at many different worlds of art. And Ricky alluded to some of this already, but Machinima itself, when it began, it was only able to be viewed as, and was intended to be viewed as, a mod or an add-on to the executable game. Like, it was meant to be run and experienced in real time using the game platform. There was no other kind of machinima. That was it. And when people started to put a foot into the world of, let's render this, let's develop the film in real time, but render it frame at a time so we can not lose anything, and then we'll distribute it as a video. That was like heresy. It was very controversial amongst the small machinima community, who had been knocking their heads against maps and editing textures and doing all this stuff to make machinima.
Right.
And all with the intent of it to be viewed real time. So it was a real controversy at that time, not one that made ripples throughout the world, just like this one with Demoscene didn't either. But that was a conversation that was happening. It reminds me a lot of conversations that happened in the world of art when Impressionism first came on the scene, Van Gogh, his style, and people would look at that and go, "What is that? Does he have a vision problem? What's going on with this? This is not how you paint." And then Cubism, it was even more so with Picasso. And it's like, what is that? That's not the way things are supposed to look. And then
Right.
Jackson Pollock basically just threw up on a canvas. And then people are like, that's not art. You can't do that. Yeah, it is. In music, it's the same thing. In 20th century music, Arthur Schoenberg, German composer, went really abstract because he started to use mathematical computations in the composition of his music, and the result was just jarring,
Astounding. Yeah.
yeah, like very, very, very unusual. Music had kind of been trending ever since Mozart, and then on to Beethoven, and evolving, and then Mahler, and it gets more and more bigger, and they're getting a little bit more experimental with their chord choices, and you're using that note that way, wow, that's wild. And then this movement comes around, this kind of avant-garde movement in music comes along with Schoenberg, and I mean it culminates, I think, in John Cage. John Cage is a composer
Right.
who went wildly experimental. In fact, I always think the pinnacle of that is he had a composition that's called 4 minutes 33 seconds. I think we've
Yes.
talked about it on this
Yeah.
show. And you can find a YouTube video of a performance of this.
Oh, yes.
Just be ready for what you're going to find, because what it will be is someone comes out to the piano, adjusts the music, sits down. He's in his coat and tails and sits down, and then just sits there at the piano. And it's in 3 movements, I believe, if I remember
It
right.
is, yeah.
And he just turns the pages, but plays nothing. And there's a lot of speculation about, there was, of course, lots of criticism of that. That's, what the hell is this? But I always assumed, I don't know if he ever actually said this, Cage. He was very talkative, so maybe in one of his interviews he did say what he intended. But my thought was always, the audience is the instrument in that piece, and it's about the experience of being there, and the slow murmurs that start to come in a first time performance of it, as people are trying to figure out what's going on here. is he going to do anything? What's happening? Little whispers and murmurs, and it grows and stuff. And I felt like that's what he wanted to capture. I don't know
Yeah.
though. That's just my interpretation of it. That's what's kind of wonderful about
Yeah.
strangely abstract stuff like that. So those conversations happened in those worlds as well. And I think this demo, as I'll get into a little bit down the page here, but it breaks some conventions that were well established, and it does. It opens up some new doors as a result. So, Tracy, you were right on the money. This practice of demos did indeed emerge in the 1980s, and it was intros for cracked software, for pirated software. When pirated software it was primarily on the Commodore 64. That's where it first emerged. When a piece of pirated software was distributed, which, by the way, no internet, so these things were distributed by hand. People would exchange discs with each other and copy them. It's kind of amazing that in Florida, allegedly obtained pirated software that had been pirated in Poland or somewhere in Eastern Europe. It's just, how in the world did this happen? I don't know. I don't know how this possibly got around without electronic delivery, but it's amazing. But these pieces, they would construct these logo demonstrations with visuals and sound, and they were all procedural. It was all code that would leverage the revolutionary sound chip that was part of the Commodore 64. It's called the SID chip, that could do stuff that no computer had been able to do before musically. You could actually have 3 voices of polyphony, which was unheard of, and they used those to the max. And then graphically, the way that they were able to literally peek and poke at parts of memory to make strange things happen on the screen. And the result was pretty extraordinary. Sometimes the pirated intro to these games was more enjoyable and entertaining and better fidelity than the game itself. Yes. So it became a real fascinating thing to see, what are they going to come up with now?
Yeah.
That's where it emerged. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar with how they ended up transitioning. Who was the person that, had that eureka moment that went, why don't we just do this? Then,
Right.
Then Interpol won't come after us or something. I don't know,
Right.
But it's fascinating. So the only other pick that we've ever had on this show that is from this field was called We Are Demo. If I'm not mistaken, this is the only one. And it was one that I had found. I found it, ironically enough, on Twitter. I did not find it by watching the real time, but it was from 2016. And it was a much more traditional demo even then. This is 13 years after the film we're reviewing today. But it was much more traditional use of graphics, and the music and everything was all procedurally generated in the traditional way. So these guys were really ahead of their time. If this was 13 years prior to that, and they were doing things very differently. I think in the world of machinima, other than maybe Klaus Dieter Schultz, who Ricky has he made a film called Nine.
Nine, he did, yeah.
Yeah.
We've reviewed
that
it.
That was very abstract, very experimental, and it's been much loved by us here on this show. Other than him, I think the only person that I can think of who I feel like
Feisy
could show up at one of these Demoscene conventions and hit the ground running is Friedrich Kirchner, who went online by Feisy. And he was probably best known, although I doubt how well known it is today, but in the Machinima days, he was best known for a film called The Journey, or Journey.
Yeah, wonderful
which he made
film.
an Unreal Tournament, wonderful film. Well, then he made 2 additional films that are much more, honestly, you could watch them and wonder, were they made by the same people that made this film? Because the techniques are stunningly similar in terms of how he used photographs and the kind of stop motion like animation, but it was all rendered in Unreal Tournament video game. Those films, by the way, are Person 2184 and
I love that movie.
If you're listening and in the audience, and we're not going to bother including links to those because
Well, we
I am,
might. We've already
spoiler
reviewed
alert,
that.
I am going to include those films as a pick in the very near future. So there's no need.
We've
We'll be
done
covering them.
Person. We have reviewed it.
Did we do one of them?
Yeah,
Was
we
it Person
reviewed.
2184?
We did that one. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
then
let's
I'll
do
pick
it
the
again.
photographer.
Yeah.
I'll do the photographer because it's
Okay.
the
another
photographer is very much in alignment with this visually. Yeah, Friedrich
true, that's
has the
true.
skill set that could do this and
Yeah.
has always leaned into that type of real-time digital puppetry type machinima. Even as far as I understand, even to this day, that's still his. I don't think he's ever done a machinima in the same manner that like Damien and I have done, where it's iClone or using some tool like that.
Right.
He's very much that what I would call old school code driven and an emphasis on abstract. He made developed a tool called Movie Sandbox, which originally was an Unreal Tournament mod, but then he made it completely independent. And it's like no real-time animation tool you have ever seen. It's nothing like anything you've ever seen. It's wild. Very simple, compared to the functionality of something like iClone, for example, but it can achieve things that are much different. And there's a bit of a learning curve with it. The documentation hasn't been updated in quite some time, but it still runs. It still functions. He, in conjunction with Movie Sandbox, is just more about Friedrich. He made something called the Milk Scanner.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Milk Scanner was basically this contraption that he created where you could put a 3D object, like a real one that you can hold in your hand, put it into a bowl of milk, and the scanner would scan one level of blocks, let's say, of almost like 3D printing in reverse. Scanning it as the milk level goes down, that's what it uses as the baseline to obscure the rest of the model while it scans it. Fascinating. And he just conceived it and did it, and there's videos demonstrating it. It's just the craziest thing you've ever seen. And then his tool, the Movie Sandbox, can be used for live digital puppeteering, which is something that really only a handful of the Machinima people, the O Clan comes to mind. That was an essential part for them of I think all of their films is to be able to perform at real time, which as you know, some of the members of that come from a background of performance, so it just made sense for them. So anyway, that's Friedrich Kirchner. The executable of this is still available. We're going to make a link to it. It was challenging to run on hardware in 2003. I don't think it'll be challenging for anybody to run today unless you've got a really old Windows 2000 computer or something.
Yeah.
So you should be fine. So the production of this, it's really hard to wrap your head around what had to go into making this, because from Machinima, we're almost always starting, if we're talking about game-based machinima, then the game engine of that game is you're given entering the equation, right? That's you're provided that, and then you build on top of that. You go to something like Godot, and it strips away any given content, and it's just the raw engine. And then you're building on that. Unreal Engine, to a degree, is that way as well, although because of their content store, you can remedy the lack of content very quickly.
Yeah.
Maybe more so than you can in Godot. Demoscene doesn't start with any of those givens. None at all. It's all coded. So they are not using a game engine. They are not using an established engine of any kind. They are writing commands to directly address the OpenGL drivers that run the hardware and all of that. That's what powers this. That's what's... When people in the demo scene would criticize this as not being a technical achievement, they're forgetting just how crazy what it is that they're doing is to us mortal beings. It's absolutely astounding that they're not relying on anybody else's engine to do this display, and to get the kind of fidelity that they're getting is amazing. So Now, what I don't understand is how they did this because, again, my thinking on it is procedural graphics like happened in the original Demoscene days, where you're basically dealing with stuff a pixel at a time, essentially. But this clearly has models in there. This has photographs in there. They're not digital, drawings. They're photos. They're like literally, if it is in physical media, they would have been cut out of like a magazine or something. It's pictures. You can recognize people in this. So how did they get all that into there? That's why I wanted to open it up and look under the hood, right? Okay, all right, so am I going to find that there's some model files here, some FBX or OBJ models, and okay, so now they use those, and then they're just using no, it's just an executable, and it's a small one. By today's standards, very small. So I don't know how they did that. I don't know how they did. I mean, the animations, I guess technically animation is math underneath it, so I get it. But to have something that codes a model just out of lines of code, that's big boy stuff. That's like really advanced. I know essentially these models can be stored as digital files, so they are just bits as well. So I guess technically it is possible to do that, but the fact that I would love to know what the process is for that. Maybe that's part of the controversy for this, because you do not typically see that in Demoscene Productions. It has a much more pixel constructed feel to it, and this feels like something that was made with real-time animation software,
Right.
even though it was not. The music is not so much of a mystery. Though it may be part of what's a controversy. The music is a separate MP3 file that's in the zip that you download with this, and it just plays that. It's an extraordinarily good piece, by the way. If you like that style of music, it's just delightful. Listen with headphones for sure. It's wonderful. There's a lot going on there. But that was something that was composed not as part of the coding.
Right.
Which is unusual for Demoscene. Usually the coders are responsible for the music too. So yeah, there's some ways that they were kind of pushing the envelope here of how much of this has to be coded and how much of it can be referring to outside stuff. So the film itself, I just love. Like it just, I wouldn't have to know a thing about how this was made, and I would have enjoyed this. It's abstract visually, but it's not abstract narratively. Basically Ricky told most of the story. It's two guys are waiting for the tram, commenting on that. Is it ever going to get here? And then one guy goes off and has kind of this dream sequence imagination of being the tram driver and kind of this. It's very dreamlike because of the absurdity of some of the characters that get onto the train. And then it culminates in this big moment, and he snaps out of it. And Ricky, you left out this detail, though I'm sure you noticed it when you watched the movie. But when the tram shows up, it kind of pulls in front of the guys at the station and then pulls away. And only the guy that did the
Yes.
daydreaming did not get on.
That's
He
right.
ends
I
up
forgot.
walking. Yeah.
I forgot. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that's a pretty clear narrative, even though there's only maybe 3 or 4 lines of dialogue in it, and they're all just printed on the screen. But it's not dialogue driven for sure. But I felt like the narrative was pretty clear. The story was pretty clear. The recognizable faces part is pretty fascinating. It's a reason for me to rewatch it because there's no clues anywhere as to who those faces are. But it's kind of like scrutinizing the cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club album cover. If you've ever looked at that, it's a collage of real people with the Beatles in front of it. This is that. There's some that I know. Oh, I know that face. I know that face. Like I'm pretty sure, and maybe Damien will be able to confirm this. Did we see Leonard Nimoy sitting on the bus at one point? Was that him? Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Spock.
Yeah, Mr. Spock. There's another that is. I don't know her name, but I'd swear she's probably like a Victoria's Secret model or something. I have a feeling that all of those faces are pulled from known sources, but some of them go by so quickly it's hard to tell. It made me even wonder, are the main characters, chopped up collages of some real historical face. It would have to be
Right.
somebody with a
Yeah.
maybe it's Friedrich Nietzsche or something with a big old mustache. I don't know. But that's a fascinating element to it. The music, as I mentioned, is just, I mean, I guess, there's no accounting for taste. So you may not like that style of music, but if you do, oh, it's just wonderful, wonderful. There's a delicate nature to it and yet a complexity. And I think that the musical timing throughout this is just stunning, like just stunning. And okay, we could argue that, well, they had the benefit of they're using math to time everything, and music can be boiled down to math for its rhythm. So, but that's even with that advantage, it's just extraordinary how well the cuts and movements and everything were synchronized to the music. And I do think it was done in that order, by the way. I do think the music preceded the sync. I don't think that they built the animation around the music. I could be wrong, but having done a few of these myself, I think that's probably the way that it went. I think the golden moment in this movie for me, as far as music and visuals coming together in a near perfect conjunction, is when the tram shifts into high gear at that point near the end, where it starts flooring it. And the visuals and the music ramps up and the intensity of everything ramps up. And they have the driver's face change expression to just wide-eyed. Oh, it's just, and even the jitter of the camera increases and just everything about it, it gives me goosebumps. It's just so well done, especially after that slow buildup that we've had. Because like you said, Tracy, most of it is it's kind of a
Relaxed.
meander, you know?
Yeah.
And then so when that moment comes, it's like it's the slingshot has been pulled back that whole time, and they release it, and it's just extraordinary. And it's I don't know, it's not often that a machinima film of any kind can give me an actual physical goosebump reaction like that, but this one is one of them. It is just terrific. So yeah, anyway, that's my very long-winded but
Wow.
excited take on this film. It's a wonderful pick, Ricky. I'm glad you found it.
Great insight. Great insight. A lot of great stuff there. To close out, I just wanted to mention that this demo, Machinima, has no reviews on archive.org. So please, somebody go in there and give it a review and favor it. You have to be a member, but they're not intrusive. Just sign up, favor it, and then give it a nice review because it deserves some good comments. We'll have
I'll do that because I did that a few weeks back for to go on Ozymandias and tell them how much you loved the film. So
That's great. I hope you quoted me.
no, I
too.
did a review just like you asked me to kind of give the context that that
Great.
posting was
Because
lacking.
that review will kick it up higher in the list of people
Sure.
who are interested in seeing it, and I think more people should see this great film.
Absolutely.
Okay, you want to close out, Phil, for us?
Yeah, that's our pick for this week. Viewers, listeners, what did you think? We would love to hear from you. Drop a comment wherever you're watching or listening to this, or drop us an email at talk@completelymachinima.com. We do read all your emails. We look forward to them and share them amongst ourselves. So
We do.
we would love that feedback from you. So on behalf of myself, Phil Rice, Tracy Harwood, Damien Valentine, and Ricky Grove, we wish you a great day.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye bye.